Welcome, 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 beautiful people. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you're here today because today is a big one. Like, it's genuinely a big one. I've been waiting weeks to share this information with you, and I'm really, really pleased that Jonathan's here with us. Jonathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jonathan, human nutritionist from Carnivore Muscle on YouTube. I'm glad to join today by the lovely Joe from Joe's Sleep and Slim Down Journey. How you doing?
I'm good. So let me tell folk what's happening today. You all know that I've been on this real and raw journey. I'm 119 pounds down. I started with morbid obesity. I was stopping breathing 600 times in the night. I was barely able to take care of myself. And now look at me. In fact, I've just let you all know that I'm starting a new job on Wednesday. Yay! But today we're putting actual data on the table. There's going to be some real numbers and some real results because we're going to be talking through my body scan results that I got from the gym because yes, I'm going to a gym. And Jonathan's going to go through not only the body scan results, but also some of my blood work. We're going to talk about everything because I want you to hear this. My results came back and even I had to do a double take. We're talking 56% muscle mass, 56%. I know. We're going to break down what this is all about, what carnivore eating is, how people can get on with the GLP-1 journey, and what it's done for my body recomposition. Am I saying that right, Jonathan? Is it body composition or body recomposition?
Body composition, yeah, that's the one.
I'm glad you're here. Dear Lord. I was going to say you were doing all the science bits, but apparently doing some sound effects as well. But yeah, you're going to talk science. You're going to be the one who's really taking the lead today. So for those of you who've got any kind of questions about your GLP-1 journey or your weight loss journey, whether you're on a health journey or a healing transformation, whatever it is, pop those questions in the chat, and we can't wait to go through and see how you're doing.
Excellent. Well, should we go through the blood test results?
Well, before we do, let's say hello to everyone. Okay, let me go through and look at who's here. So obviously, I'm here. Folks, I'm here. Jonathan's also here. Carnivore Muscle. We've got Laurie Barber here. Laurie Barber, oh. I'm sorry, I'm going to be singing to you all, folks. We've got Rick here, Rick from Charge and Mopar. Lovely to see you, Rick. He says hello from the Big Quack. And he is indeed a big quack, a big quackers, but we adore him. And so if you're not already subscribed to Rick, please do so. We see we've got Jason here. So Jason asks, when is the engagement proposal coming, Jonathan?
I want to know how much you got paid to ask that. That's the question I've got for him first.
That's it. It was not me. I was not responsible for that one, Jason. We've got Dee Busway here. Hadrine's in the house. She says, good afternoon, folks. Now, Hadrine's coming over from Texas. So that's why she says that afternoon. For us in the UK, it's 6:05, isn't it, Jonathan?
That's it, yeah, 6:05.
Jules now from Wiltshire. Jules, she's also based in the UK. Hi, Jules. She says hi, Joe and Jonathan.
Not far from me.
Not far at all. Not far at all. We've got people saying the congrats for my job, so thank you so much. I'm really excited. And I mean, can you imagine? Did we even imagine this time last year? We did not. We've got Heather here from Heather Ray's Healthy Habits. She says, hey! So it's lovely to see you, Heather. We've got Wellness with Liza, my gorgeous friend Liza, and she has lost an incredible amount of weight, Jonathan. She's also got a chronic illness, so this one will be really interesting for her too. Jonathan and I both suffer with chronic illnesses. Do you want to tell them a little bit about yours, Jonathan?
Yeah, so I live with a failed spine surgery which resulted in a condition called CRPS type 2. It's effectively a neurological autoimmune pain disorder, which means I experience a lot of pain. It's called basically what it stands for is complex regional pain syndrome, which means it's a complex thing which you can't solve with vitamin C or glucosamine. Pain, obviously pain. Regional, meaning it's just compartmentalized in specific areas of my body. But it can spread, unfortunately. But I also live with autism and chronic fatigue as well. So I can relate to a lot of people in the chat right now. And just like Joe, I experienced quite some issues of, mobility, and trying to keep up fitness is quite a bit of a challenge, but still getting it done. Well, what about you, Joe? What's your story?
Well, I'm just excited that you and I are the cutest couple, because the two of us walk with canes and we hold each other's hands, and yet still have to support each other with our own canes. But yes, as I say, there's many people out there who know my journey, and we'll probably talk about it in a little more detail. Let me go through the chat still, because we've got Delilah, my gorgeous friend Delilah, live with Lala. Now, Jonathan, Delilah has lost, wait for this, 270 pounds.
She's lost both of us.
Quite possibly, yes. She has done an incredible job. And you know what? She has a whole host of chronic illnesses as well. So I'm so glad that Delilah's here. We're going to find out some great things together. But Jonathan is our nutrition coach, and he's also a body composition coach. So get your questions ready. We've got some for you. But also we're going to go through my results. So this session is going to be a good session today. I'm just going through. We've got Nicole Ray is here. Nicole Ray, she also has some complex needs. She's going through surgery now, but she has also lost an incredible amount of weight. Her exercise of choice is yoga. Am I right, Nicole? We've got idiosyncratic girl, my sister Z. She is from the Dominique. She's a sister island to St. Lucia. And for those of you who don't know, whenever Sister Z is on the chat, we always do some different formats. So we do different formats. Okay then, Jonathan, have we gone through the chat? I see. Before we move back onto some more information about what we're doing today, I can see that Mr. Randomville's here. Mr. Randomville recently got married. So Jason, hopefully Terence will be talking to Jonathan about proposals and whatnot. Again, I'm just putting it out there. We've got Karen on. Hi, Karen. It's lovely to see you. And let's have a look what else we've got. I thought it was your mum. You're the wonderful Karen. And I'm looking forward to meeting you soon. We've got Clint in the house who says he likes turtles. Who doesn't like turtles? I know who likes Toby, and that is, of course, the Teddy D. So lovely to see you. And I'm so happy, so thrilled to see beautiful Brenda. Brenda is also a Floridian, so she's right there with Rick. Okay, let's get on and discuss what we're going to discuss today. Jonathan, do you want to take a look at the results?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully put the right thing. There we go. You can all see that.
We can, but I'm only half on there. I think you had to take down Teddy's message.
Bear with me.
Whilst you're doing that, can I say hello to the feral grandma? Grandma, it's so lovely to see you.
There we go. All right, so we're on board now. We're all good to go. Yeah, so that's Joe back then. And we're talking literally 1 year ago. Look at the difference there. That's mental. Completely different person. And different colour hair as well. So he started off with 351 pounds back in April last year, and today you are 232 pounds. Very good work. Very good work. So this is basically some data, some scientific information about Joe's journey, where she is now, basically. So started off she's been doing carnivore diets and low carb diets for a very long time now, probably longer than me. She's been using tirzepatide as a weight loss jab, effectively, to help suppress appetite, reduce inflammation, help mobility, help with different health markers, and that's where she's at now. So as you can see here, so hemoglobin A1c is roughly a 3-month snapshot of the glycation levels within her blood, And basically what that means is she's trying to fit it within range, and that's certainly within range. So she's at 33 millimoles per mole, and the range is up to 41, so that's a good reading. Now the goal isn't obviously to be 0, because that means your body's not doing any glycation, which is pretty much impossible. So there's always going to be some level of it, but it's a very good number, and it's well within the range of what would be considered healthy. But before I sort of go into any more of these details, I just want to point out that these are normative ranges based on an unhealthy general user population. So although it might say up to 41 in this instance, ideally you probably want it a bit less than that. So Joe's doing certainly just that. Now, serum ferritin, that's measuring the blood levels of iron, and that is 270 micrograms per litre. Now, it's not exactly a problem, because if she had elevated CRP levels, that'd be indicative of oxidized iron within her body, which is the stored iron here. But because she's not having any issues, having that slightly above isn't necessarily a problem. It means her diet is working, so all that beef is going in, and certainly fueling her iron levels and red blood cell formation. So very good work there. Now, this is some more of the body composition stuff. So I mean, a lot of people go on these sort of medications to actually lose weight and improve the body composition, so a bit more muscle. And what it does here is basically she's used a bioimpedance scale, which measures the current of electricity that it takes to pass through the body. So effectively, the less water you have in your body, but the more fat you have, the higher the fat mass will be, basically. So it's basically just a proxy marker of what your body's doing at that time. Now, I'll zoom in a little bit here. So here we've got the total muscle mass, which constitutes the muscle on our body effectively. So what allows it to do stuff. That's 56.4%, which is pretty good, in my opinion. And now, and the total fat mass is 40.6. You're looking to bring that down a bit. So perhaps something like, I don't know, 20 pounds, a stone and a half, something like that. Or from the UK, maybe 10 kilos, something like that. That will effectively change this number over time. But the goal isn't so much to get a certain weight. It's more about the composition overall, because that's a better indicator of long-term health outcomes. Just to point out, these are serum creatinine levels, and that's the top end of normal. Now, these can be elevated if you're in a situation where you're exercising, as Joe has been recently. And if you're eating a lot of protein as well, particularly beef, you'll actually absorb some of the creatine from the beef that you're eating, and that will then be excreted, well, put into your blood first, then excreted, and that will show up as a serum creatinine level. So that's basically a byproduct of, sometimes you might say, too much meat or too much exercise, but in her instance, it's not that much of a problem at all. My levels, for example, are much higher than that, but I exercise, so it's not seen as a marker of liver damage, but effectively these are some proxy markers of liver health. Next one, serum urea levels. So when you take in protein effectively, you'll have some urea in your urine. It's just another byproduct that your body's measuring. If your body's filtration systems aren't working effectively, and that level can be ridiculously high. Now, that level is a bit higher, but she does have a high protein diet, which means it's not necessarily a problem. So with all these numbers, guys, it's not that you're trying to get within a certain bracket all the time. But if, for example, she had high inflammation, poor kidney function, then that might indicate something else. So it's another number to pull from, but not necessarily a hard data point to look at.
Before we go on to the next point, Jonathan, we've got a question that's come in at 6:14. It's from Johnny Ovadia, and he is also on a carnivore diet. So that's what I was thinking. It might be useful to talk about this question right now. He has, I don't have any vascularity since going carnivore. Any idea as to why that might be? What is vascularity, first of all, Jonathan?
Vascularity just means your formation of blood vessels. But in this instance, it's probably talking about the amount of veins he's got on his biceps. So how pumped he looks, how full his muscles look. So, for example, if you put me on a diet and you didn't feed me anything, so I had no substrate in body, I'd eventually become more glycogen depleted. And when your body's holding onto more glycogen, so more formed glucose along with water molecules from your body, you'll have a bigger sort of look, and that means the muscles will press against the skin more, which means you'll show more veins effectively. So, you know, if I do a workout in the gym and pump up my biceps, and I'll I have more vascularity. Now, I did actually answer Johnny Avadia's question in Stephen's live chat. I believe it was yesterday. And he came to the same conclusions that I did. So I don't know if he wants to check that out again, but just to reiterate the point, my personal sort of experience is that people will switch from a high carb diet to a low carb or carnivore ketogenic style diet, but they won't replace substrates that they're missing from a high carbohydrate diet. So for example, you might be going from, now these are arbitrary numbers, but you might be going from 200 protein, 200 carbs and 50 grams of fat per day. Then you go on a carnivore diet, then effectively if you just take away all the carbs, you're left with maybe 200 protein, 0 carbs and 50 grams of fat still. So if you're not actually meeting your substrate requirements to create energy to allow you to do work, so exercise, think, anything like that, then your muscles will become more glycogen depleted. Now, when I say depleted, I don't mean absolutely deficient. If you are truly glycogen depleted, then you effectively wouldn't be able to move. So there's always a level of glucose within your body that your body will try to maintain. The only instance where this doesn't happen is when you've been doing a diet, which might be a fast, a dry fast, anything like a water fast, where you're not putting anything in. And that's for a very prolonged period of time. And that will lead to something which is known as protein poisoning, which is a bit of a misnomer. The actual condition is called rabbit starvation, which means you have no body fat on your body. Your body can't then turn over protein on your body from the form of muscles into glucose, which means your blood glucose levels will be lower, your muscle glycogen levels will be lower, then eventually that's it, you'll kick the bucket. So you want to make sure your substrates are full. So in this instance, you'd have to make sure his protein was probably the same, 200 grams of protein. Then the fat would be whatever he's missing from the carbohydrate. So you might be on 0 carbs, 200 protein, but rather than being on 50 grams of fat, he'd have to be on maybe, just thinking off the top of my head, maybe 100 grams of fat. So he has to replace what he's missing. The other thing that you have to think about is that a transitional process does take time. So oftentimes there'll be a lag period where you have to upregulate enzymes in your biochemistry to ensure that your muscle glycogen synthase is sufficient and adequate to provide the energy needed to do the job that you have to do in the gym, for example. My tips for maximizing outside of that brief explanation in terms of vascularity are lots of salt. So enough salt, don't make yourself ill. Lots of water so you can store whatever glycogen you will be creating from fat eventually through gluconeogenesis. And also that'll be through protein as well in some cases. Then the other tip is hot food. So think a bone broth with some butter in it with some salt, hot water. That's probably the quickest fix you can do for increasing vascularity on a carnivore diet. But that's just my opinion. Joe, do you have any sort of take on that at all now that you're training? And
no idea. You know what I'm like, you're here for the science. But I wanted to ask you specifically about salt. You mentioned salt. A lot of us in the GLP-1 space, we have started to take electrolytes. So is that the same thing? I don't know.
Yeah, so electrolyte powders would typically contain sodium, magnesium, potassium. Sometimes they'll contain calcium and other things as well, but they're not necessarily needed, just because calcium requirements are quite individual. I find that if you eat too much calcium, your body will probably give you some feedback to sort of tell you that you might have digestive issues. Effectively, that can lead to calcification of the artery. So calcium is one you have to look carefully at. Your body will excrete minerals, but calcium has a harder time dealing with just because it is such a large mineral, and the bracket or margin that you need to supply yourself with is quite, how to put it, it's quite slim. So you want to get calcium right. So a lot of people don't supplement it with it because of that reason. But yeah, that's my take on the calcium and everything.
That's just made me think about me and calcium, because of my heart issues. I have to be really careful with calcium. So I always work with my healthcare providers, whether it's my GP, whether it's the consultants, to understand what my requirements are. For example, I've got to be careful of potassium. So please make sure that you get advice from your healthcare specialists. Jonathan is also available for consultations if you want to have more of a one-to-one experience with him. Before we go on to the water mask, can I just say hello to JC Clarity Jane? No, she's on a GLP-1, but she also suffers with type 1 diabetes. And that takes us nicely onto the point that idiosyncratic girl mentioned, is that in the US, they measure A1C, and it's the equivalent of 5.2. So where I'm within the lower regions, they're looking for anything below 5.2.
Yeah, it's a good version. They both they're just two different metrics because we use a different system to them, but it all means the same thing at the end of the day. Yeah, so perfect. JC, she's managing things very well, all things considered. She's in a lot better shape than I imagine she used to be. So she can be very proud of herself for sure.
We've got another question, actually, still relating to carnivore protein and ketones. So I'm saying it's all related. You're going to explain this in a little bit more detail. Nicole asked at 6:17, carnivore muscle, is it bad to always have ketones in your urine?
Now this is quite a complex question. I made a video about this a couple of years ago, and I think it's titled something like "Forget About Ketosis." If you comment in the stream after this in the comment box, I'll provide you the link to that video just so you can look over it in case I miss anything now. But effectively, what your body's doing when it's producing ketones is the default energy substrate for the body and the brain. So provided that you weren't doing anything, you just sat in a tree for like a few days, then your muscle glycogen levels and your liver glycogen levels will become less full, so they become slightly deficient, deplete in some cases. What your body will do is actually metabolize adipose tissue from your body fat, so you're stored, your belly basically, and it will fat under the skin paps. They'll convert that into ketones, which will then be oxidized. It creates something called beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a energy system for the body. It's got a high ATP yield and a low it's got a low toxicity, low wastage, so it's a very clean form of energy that your body would naturally produce, so it's not harmful at all. Typically people that go on to a carnivore or ketogenic style diet, they'll notice that after maybe 3 to 4 to 5 days, their ketone levels will raise. Now this will raise quite individually, so I'm not a fan of trying to go for a certain number. Is it dangerous? No. Ketoacidosis in the context that people describe sometimes online is inaccurate. Your body would not create something that was trying to harm it. So when your body is doing anything in the blood, it's a way of protecting itself. And of course, it doesn't mean we're invincible, but it means that our body is trying to find a way kind of to hack the system if you're in a state where you're eating the wrong food, not exercising, living healthy lifestyle, things like that. Now, what will sometimes happen is you might be in a steady state of ketosis of, say, maybe 1 to 5 units. That's quite individual on how people feel. I don't like to be in a deep level of ketosis personally. It makes me feel horrible. So I stay at about 0.5 to 1 if I measured it. But what's an interesting anecdote is if you are on a state of ketosis and you go to a ketogenic carnivore diet, then you go off that diet and you have a cheat meal over the weekend or a treat meal, lots of carbs, think of a buffet, your ketone levels will drop. The energy substrate that you're creating for your body will then change over to glycolysis. So you're creating glycogen basically through sugar, through the dietary intake of carbohydrates. What will then happen after a few days of going back onto a ketogenic style diet is your ketone levels will begin to rise, but they may actually go back down again. You'll think, oh, what's gone wrong here? Is it that I'm eating the wrong food? There's too much sugar? Is there hidden alcohol sugars in my diet? Well, no, your body's just making use of the ketones that are in your blood. And there's caveats and issues of all of the different ketone measurements that we might use. So there's blood, urine, breath. They have different pros and cons. Obviously, some are more or less invasive. I find that they don't measure what your body's actually utilizing. So it gives you an idea that you're on a right diet, but I wouldn't necessarily be concerned if your keto levels in your body for whatever testing method actually decreased over time, because it just means that your body is using them more effectively. So whenever you change a diet from one thing to another, the enzymatic reactions in your body, the biochemistry of your body will actually change, which means that the level will change itself, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But you're welcome to track these things, but honestly, I think you're wasting your time. They're expensive things. These Keto Mojo breath things, they're $200-$300. The ketone strip monitor, you're looking at paying a lot of money for the strips themselves. so they are expendable. You have to keep buying them, and the urine tests are quite inaccurate. You might get 2 different readings depending on the solubility of your urine, the sedimentation of your urine. If you're hydrated or not will make a difference as well. So that will affect the concentration within the volume of the test that you're actually doing. So that's my take. But no, to answer your question, it's not always bad to have ketones in your urine.
Thank you. And just a reminder, Feral Grandma's just pointed out, of course, that ketoacidosis is something that mainly affects type 1 diabetics. And Jen, as a type 1 diabetic, says, remember that you really need to be mindful of these things based on your relevant comorbidities. So always be sure to check in with your healthcare provider whenever it comes to anything specifically about ketoacidosis. But ketones and ketoacidosis, 2 completely different things. Before we continue, I want to say hello to my queen, Z. Z's in the chat. Lovely to see you, Z. And Lord Grant, Viola Campbell, and the beautiful iron coloured Evelyn is also in the house. So lovely to see you folks. Okay, Jonathan, let's continue with the report, and then we'll go back to some questions.
Sure. So we got up to the water mass of the body. So this will be affected quite deeply by the hydration of your body. I mean, if you just go through your day, you might increase your body weight by, say, 2 kilos from 2 liters of water if you drink it. Of course, you're going to be excreting some, but it depends how much you drink. So this number can fluctuate quite a bit. Generally, the more water someone has in their body, unless they're inflamed, it means the more muscle mass, because fat contributes. Well, fat will actually have a certain amount of water within it itself, the stored body fat within your body. But muscle mass is actually probably more water. So think a steak. It might have 20 grams of protein per 100 grams and maybe 20 grams of fat per 100 grams. That leaves 60 grams of other matter, which means it could be water and other components like that, vitamins, minerals, and things like that. The serum potassium level, this number can be affected mostly from kidney function. And if you've got healthy kidneys, it'll generally be regulated quite well. Again, this number here, this range is based on a healthy population. People like myself, I tend to have high levels of serum potassium levels that will again be affected by my muscle mass, my water content of my body. So it means to contract your muscles, you need potassium. And if there's not enough potassium in your body, you can't perform the job. So again, these are rudimentary numbers, really. They don't mean too much. But if the number was, of course, say, it's 3.8, but if that number was, for example, 2, or it was maybe 8, we might have a problem. But again, you have to look at the summative information from the data we have. So it's not a causal element in terms of like kidney function, liver health, things like that. This one is visceral fat.
Can I just go on to explain a little bit about the potassium, Jonathan, and sodium? So for me, another one of my comorbidities is actually that I suffer with a condition called primary aldosteronism. And it's because my adrenal glands are kicking out too much. Well, you'll be able to explain it a little bit better for me, won't you, Jonathan? What is primary aldosteronism, and how might that actually be affecting my sodium levels, my potassium levels, and my kidney function? Because I do have chronic kidney disease.
Yeah, so your kidney function can be measured by things like your EGFR, which is the glomerular filtration rate. People of a black descent, different ethnicity to me, white, basically, they'll have a slightly different index or a way of calculating that number. So first, of course, you've got to note what race you are, basically.
Jonathan, they've changed that with the NHS. They've changed that. They've changed it. Inequality.
They've changed it, but it doesn't hold true to the fact that it still means it's a different number. It's going to be a different number because of the race. So people with primary aldosteronism will often have it's basically several different medication use. You might use an ARB, which is an angiotensin receptor blocker. You might use an ACE2, I think. You might use a diuretic. You might use, there's another one, I think it's called an SGLT2, which basically will lower the amount of blood glucose you have, so the less glycation will happen in your kidneys. which means your mitochondria within your kidney cells will function better, which means they'll repair better, which means your kidney function, the EGFR number will improve over time. So effectively, you have to use medication to manage your kidney function levels, which manages by default your hydration levels. So Joe's someone that can have a different number compared to a lot of people in terms of like potassium and things like that. But you can manage these things with medications. Obviously, it's better not to use them, but with medical science that we have nowadays, it's certainly helpful, I guess, in that case.
Can I explain as well that I'm on a calcium channel blocker, and this is the one thing that they found with people with different races. For those of us that are Black or African descent, we struggle with the HACE inhibitors. So they don't put us on those. Instead, they tend to put us on the channel calcium blockers. The reason why they changed the calculation on the EGFR was because a lot of people of Black and Afro-Caribbean descent were being lost in the system. They were seen to be, oh, well, we tend to see a higher rate in Black and Caribbean folks, so let's not look at them until they get to a lower rate. But in turn, that meant that by the time they got to see us, we were in great level of damage, and then we were unable to get hold of kidney transplants. So then we had a higher morbidity rate from having a chronic kidney disease. So now in the NHS, certainly in the NICE guidelines, they've taken out the difference in looking at that calculation and just say whatever the EGFR is, if they're at this level, then we look at it and we do something about it.
Yeah, and people of an African descent will also have a different response to different medications. People can get a cough, for example, from, I can't remember which one it is. I think is it Nebivolol or Amlodipine? I can't remember which one. But I'm not that well versed in that kind of sense. But yeah, there's different side effects which affect people a bit differently. So they might be, medical professionals might be more urged to sort of go one route rather than the other route. But the eventuality is they're trying to create the same solution. So.
We've got another question actually at 6:22. Again about sodium, potassium and magnesium. It's from Johnny again, and he says, in terms of electrolytes, should you just consume sodium in the form of salt or add in potassium and magnesium? And if so, how much salt?
And that's absolutely impossible to answer, and giving you an answer would be quite negligent from a medical standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint. Generally speaking, most people, I say most, nearly everyone, we find if they eat a diet with enough potassium, enough magnesium, enough sodium in it. Sodium's I guess you could say, a key mineral, because it will help regulate the uptake of other minerals and also, again, create muscle glycogen and things like that. So you do need enough salt. So that's one, I'll be making sure you have enough of it on your body. It's not going to be an issue. Your body will excrete any excess that it takes in a healthy person. As for potassium, magnesium, it depends on the context of your diet, so I couldn't even begin to speculate, to be honest. But I mean, if you're eating a diet full of processed food, you're going to need more. That's what I can tell you. So.
Right. Interesting. Well, speaking of processed food, you know as well as I do that I do not eat processed food because of the issues that I have with IBS, which is one of the reasons why I've been living a low carb lifestyle. Now, for many of us who are on a GLP-1, many of us we either have pre-diabetes or we are type 2 diabetics. So many of us have chosen to use low carb as the way that we lose our weight. So a way of eating. We're not going to say diet, because I think for many of us who are in that situation, we know we're trying to cut down carbs in general rather than just for a specific time period. So let's talk now about my visceral fat.
Yeah, so visceral fat is effectively the fat that surrounds your organs. So it's not subcutaneous. So if you pinch your skin, it's not the skin that you can pinch, like the fat under it, it's within your organs. So it's very hard to measure. One thing we can do, though, is we can measure our waist circumference. And we can be pretty sure if our waist is 40, 50, 60 inches, you're probably storing a lot of visceral fat. It's quite a genetic thing as well. So, for example, I'm sure we all know someone out there who might be from Asian descent, for example. and they'll have what seems like no fat on their body. They might actually have a lot of visceral fat. It's just where they store it more based on their genetics, their heritage, their ancestral capacity to acquire food. If they're in positions where they're starving often in severe climates, perhaps severe conditions, they might actually have more visceral fat. Their body will be doing that deliberately to protect organs. So it's to insulate organs and also to prevent damage from them as well. So if you're in a situation where you're out and about a lot and you're falling, then yeah, you're going to want some visceral fat because it's dangerous to not have any. You also need enough to regulate your thyroid levels, your leptin levels, and also to create hormones within your body. But people don't really often get to that situation where there's too little, simply because we're not all bodybuilders. So by default, you're not having to worry too much about that. But the idea is to have as little as possible, but enough that it still supports what you're trying to do with your day-to-day life. And getting back to the points, I've already covered the hemoglobin A1c. Already covered that one. So we're looking at the visceral fat here, which is 11, which is actually very low. When I say low, I don't mean low as in too low. I mean low as in it's really good, considering Joe's body weight. It's in a very good state. So it means her diet is most probably impacting it. So she follows a carnivore style way of eating, and that's a good measurement. So I'd be happy with that if I saw that.
Could I ask you then, Jonathan, why do you think that my visceral, the way that I eat, is impacting my visceral fat? What is it about the carnivore diet that may in fact be helping here?
Yeah, so in a low insulin state within the body, the visceral fat levels will actually be less, just because the body is working less hard to maintain itself. So your body's not trying to accumulate fat tissue because it's not under a high situation of stress. So I'm sure we know people out there who are high stress individuals. They might be seemingly eating the same diet as before, but the waist is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not necessarily because they're doing anything wrong. It just means their stress state is too high, which means the proportion of fat is stored more so in visceral fat, which is within or around the organs, versus subcutaneous, which is under the skin. So that's why, basically.
And I'm just noticing that we've got Anissa in the house. She's watching, but she's also watching a playoff game. Now, Anissa has lost another huge amount of weight. She's on a GLP-1, but she's also a type 2 diabetic. So she's been doing low carb as well. So would that be a similar sort of thing then, that if she's doing low carb, she would have probably less insulin issues? I don't know. Have I explained that incorrectly?
Yeah. That's right, yeah, for sure.
And JC's just explained that Medtronic is coming out with a glucose and ketone combo meter. So for those of you who are checking your glucose and your ketones, then keep an eye out for Medtronic.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be a quite handy device. I don't see a problem with that sort of thing at all. All I'd personally say is people nowadays are looking at these indexes of numbers. So they'll have what's called a glucose ketone index. What it effectively means is sod all. There's no hard data out there to suggest that having a certain level really means anything. What we want to do when we're looking at any sort of blood markers, urine markers, is them in isolation, spot if there's a problem, then we can work out how to tackle it. Having these arbitrary numbers where we have, a graph here saying maybe, it's a BMI is a good example. So it might be weight here and height here, or waist circumference. Well, you might have a low body weight, but a very high waist circumference because you've got no muscle. So does it really mean anything? No, not really. So these sort of things are a bit useless in my opinion, just because there's no data. And, but what I'd say that is if they're measuring two things, so you're not stabbing yourself twice, it's going to be more efficient. So I can see the benefit in that kind of regard, yeah.
And it's 6:39. We've got Polish Mike in the house. Hi, Polish Mike.
Hello.
And he explains, I just had a pack of raw ground venison and some stew meat for lunch. I never had venison before, but I love it. I think I'll be getting some more often.
Yeah, I like venison. It's actually quite affordable. It's about £14 per kilo when I look for it. The only thing about it is it's very lean. But outside of that, it's got a load of iron, lots of omega-3, so it's definitely a good food source. I would be having more of it if I could find more of it, personally. Yeah.
And Jonathan, for those of us who are on a carnivore diet, or those of us who are on low carb, we tend to do more high protein. But what is the difference in like high protein and high fat? What is that all about?
In terms of what your body's doing from a biochemical standpoint, you have something which is called the Randall cycle, which is developed or postulated by a man called Philip Randall. So Philip Randall, I think it was 1963, I might be wrong. Effectively, what it means is you have a cross-inhibition effect of two different substrates, being glucose and fatty acids, trying to enter the cells of your body at the same time. The problem is when you put too much in the system, but it can't deal with it because there's not enough, I guess you could say, volume to the cell, it causes something called chaos, which in science means not good stuff. So you get what's called elevated inflammation or chronic systemic inflammation. What your body will then do is it'll then prevent more substrates from coming into the cell or out of the cell. So effectively, things like the neurotransmission will decrease. So if you're in a low mood state, you'll feel more inflamed, you'll feel bad because your body's not effectively using the energy properly. Other things as well, I mean, your mitochondria spin at a rate of about 8,000 or 9,000 RPM in an optimal state. So your mitochondria actually have nanomotors in them, literally like whizzy little whirly things. What they're trying to do is take the substrate, fatty acids or glucose from that cell that's in a cell and process it through something called the electron transport chain. And basically what it's doing is each step is trying to create something called ATP, which is the cell's energy. So all of our bodies don't run on calories at all. They don't run on fat. They don't run on carbs. They don't run on protein. They run on energy, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And that allows our cells to function and do stuff, basically. Now, what happens when we have too much in the system is, like I said, we get too much inflammation. We can't produce enough energy. The mitochondria become damaged, and therefore we're unable or less able to execute our genetic biological system perfectly. Perfect being as good as we can. So when we have junk food in our diet, our body's not creating energy efficiently anymore, which means we have less resilience to disease, infection, a higher probability of getting ill from something, because we can't deal with the oxidation that happens in the mitochondria because of that. That's the problem with having too many carbs, too many fats. Carbs are not an essential nutrient. Glucose is. We cannot create carbs through things like air. We have to take something in. We have to create glucose somehow. And we could do that through a process called gluconeogenesis, which is effectively through lactate. So think lactic acid when you're in the gym, you're getting a burn. That's your body trying to create an energy system to exercise. It's also giving you a warning saying, this is quite hard. We're not going to do this forever, but we're going to give you this backup buffer system to create energy. The other one is through glucose, through carbohydrates. Again, it's quite a simple one-step process. The other one is protein, so we can create glucose through about 45% of the amino acids that we take in, which are what constitute protein peptides. And the other one is fatty acids. So you take the cholesterol backbone off a fatty acid, that gets churned through the electron transport chain to create energy. Now, there's no essential requirement for carbohydrates in a diet at all. They're not additive for most people. They don't benefit people for the most part. Evidence to support that claim comes from, well, the fact that ketogenic diets perform better in fat loss studies, body composition studies than a carbohydrate-based diet. That's what the science says. We can't dispute that. It's mechanistic. We can see that observationally, and there's studies to prove that as well. But fatty acids we do need. We do need fat. Fat will contain cholesterol, saturated fat, omega-3. So if we choose one or the other, we have to choose fats because we cannot survive in a diet with no fat in it. We will die eventually. We can't create hormones effectively. Other things as well is the elevated blood glucose, which leads to inflammation. Carbohydrates have a much higher glycation rate compared to other nutrients. So the idea is to minimize that so the kidneys can function optimally, mitochondria can function optimally, and things like that. But I mean, that's quite a strong question to ask just because it's so multifaceted. We can't cover it in a 10-minute Q&A. But that's the whistle-stop tour on it. That's more than what anyone out there would need to know, in my opinion.
Oh, that's good then. Well, I was going to ask you more questions on that, but maybe that's for another day. Now, we have got a question from Mike, and it's very similar to a question that we had from Johnny earlier. So if we go to Mike's, it's at 6:41, and he says, I'm trying to go from 14% body fat to about 9 to 10%. What would be the best way to do so, i.e. macros or protein intake and fat ratios and steps, etc.? What are your thoughts there?
Okay, with no information at all about his body weight, his current diet, his hydration, his supplements, if he's performance enhancing drugs, his age, his activity levels, his step count, his current diet, I'm pretty much screwed. I can't give him a template piece of advice. But what I can say is you should be focusing on protein, obviously, to sustain the muscle that you have on your body. My recommendations of protein intake for most people, if you're physically active, i.e. training 2 to 4, maybe more times per week, is 2.2 to 2.5 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Now, if you're over fat, in this case he isn't, he's still lean, I'd shoot for the slightly higher end of it, and that's just a rough guideline. In terms of fat intake, I don't know his activity levels currently. If I said to him to do, 200 protein and 200 fat, he might gain a stone in a month, or he might lose a stone in a month. So it's basically trying to find protein, which is going to be the mainstay of your diet. That is not something that should be fluctuating much, if at all. But if you're increasing muscle mass over time, that number will graduate to a higher level. The fat intake should reduce by default. If your goal is to do it the quickest, your best bet, protein sparing modified fast. Again, generic advice, you might be constipated doing it. So I'd certainly book in for a consultation, because that is impossible to give much more information outside of that, to be honest. But yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you. Now, you just mentioned there about the 2.2 and whether you're more active. Now, I just want to go back to, my basal metabolic rate. It was, or it currently is, at 1981 calories per day. Am I right in thinking that is me doing no activity?
Yeah, so basal metabolic rate means you're, God forbid, but say you're stuck in hospital, you're sat in bed, you're not doing anything other than drinking, breathing, sleeping. That number is, I do not support the idea that calories should be used in any case, in any circumstance at all for anyone in the world. You should be looking at your macros, which are what constitute the protein, fat, carbohydrate intake that you might have. It's a proxy marker for the amount of energy or effective energy you're taking in from your food. Some people will digest protein and utilize loads of it. So they'll create or produce more energy from that, which would be broken down eventually into ATP, as I described earlier. Carbohydrates, proteins, 4 calories per gram, 9 calories for fats. I've not seen that to be the case, to be honest. In my experience, now this is based on 17 years of looking at my numbers and my intakes. Proteins probably contain for most people about 3 to 3.2 calories per gram. Carbohydrates about 4, fats about 9. So protein does throw it off a lot. If someone's on a very high protein diet like me, the effective calories that they might be taking in theory would be a lot lower. Some people will also transmute carbohydrates differently to others. The insulin signaling will affect that a lot as well. So I found personally, the insulin side of things, which is secreted to deal with the carbohydrates that you're taking in, will impact the calorie number or supposed calorie number by about 20%. So what that means is You could have someone on 1,600 calories, or you could have someone on 2,400 calories, the same bodies, but get different outcomes entirely, just because they've added carbohydrates into their diet. What I see anecdotally and with clients is that people that are on a carnivorous, ketogenic, or low carb diet, typically they'll find that they can eat about 10 to 20% more total theoretical calories than people on a matching carbohydrate intake. So that's been my experience. But yeah, there we go.
Well, that's a great point. And I just see already in the chat that we've got Grandma's Crochet Corner in. So hi, Grandma. Now, Grandma had a very similar scenario to me when we first started. We were immobile, we were housebound, and we were really, really struggling. And I was still struggling whilst being a carnivore. But then the moment I got my CPAP machine and was able to get some sleep, then suddenly the GLP-1 was also supporting the anti-inflammatory elements. So then the carnivore diet was really coming into its own. This is the first part of that question. Could you answer to why that might be?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Just the fact that carnivore wasn't working for me until I got sleep and I got my inflammation, my chronic inflammation under control, and I did that with the GLP-1.
Okay. Yeah, so you need sleep to reset your body's biological system. In cases where someone isn't sleeping as much, or if at all, for a few days, they'll find that they downregulate their metabolic rate. The body's going to find ways to slow it down. So you're going to find your blood pressure drops, typically. Your heart rate will lower. Your breath rate will lower. When you breathe, actually, guys, when you actually breathe, like out, that is when the weight loss actually occurs. So it's not from what you excrete, it's actually what you breathe out. So if you're breathing out less, you're effectively oxidizing fat less, so you're losing body fat less. What else is there? I mean, there's leptin signaling. If your circadian rhythm is off, so you're staring at screens all night, you're getting up in the morning and lying in bed until midday, your hormones are not going to function optimally. In the morning, ideally, you want a bit of sunlight, 10 minutes, half an hour, something like that. Basically, you want to try and get your skin, your eyes looking somewhat towards the sun, not directly at it. And that's going to be the best way to signal your body to rev up your creation of melatonin, which is then stored, which is then released at nighttime. So melatonin will also impact other things downstream in a cascade of different hormonal events. That's a very complicated biochemical thing, way beyond my scope. But effectively, if you don't do things that your body's trying to tell you to do, then your body is going to get wound up. So when you're tired, don't then drink 10 coffees. When you're hungry, eat some food, as long as it's the right food. Now, if you're hungry, you eat some food, you eat, let's say, 1,000 calories of Snickers bars, but you're still hungry. That's not an effective way of understanding your hunger signals. So that's where something like GLP-1 will come in, where it regulates your blood glucose levels. When you're hungry, it means you probably are actually hungry. So that's why sleep might impact your fat loss.
And then the second part of my question there was, because I was so much heavier, then my basal metabolic rate would have been higher than what it currently is now at 1981. You said earlier on that if you're high activity, try and look at 2.2 grams of protein per kilo. Well, I was originally doing about 150, but when I'm not feeling so great, I increase my protein, and I am seeing a difference from doing that. Why am I seeing a difference from going from 1 gram of protein per kilo right up to 2.2? Why might that see a better improvement in my general health, but also my fat loss?
So your metabolic rate is based on the amount of predominantly active metabolic tissue on your body. A person weighing 500 pounds, regardless if they're over fat or muscular, I don't think you'll find a 500 pound muscular person. Let's say you did, their metabolic rate will probably be quite similar. But the thing is, muscle tissue is more metabolically active. For example, we create more heat. The more muscular you are, we all know muscular people like myself, we're quite warm people. Our metabolic rate is higher. Our mitochondrial efficiency is higher. We're making more use of what food we're taking in. And so by default, there's more byproducts. Now, on the flip side, we've also got to be mindful that having too much body fat will impact our mobility, our fitness levels, our ability to take part in activity. So therefore, we're not going to be as mobile, obviously. So that means we're not going to be moving as much. We're not going to need as much oxygen. We're not going to create as much ketones. We're not going to oxidize as much fat. So fat loss will actually slow down. So there's a fine tuning to that, and it takes a bit of time for a lot of people. But in your case, Joe, I probably wouldn't shoot for the 2.2, just because your body fat is more than, is it 35%? So I think it's about 41%, something like that. So for you, it'd be more a case of maybe 2 grams per kilo. What's been interesting actually is Bart K and I, Professor Bart K, we both suggested something like 1.75 grams per kilo of ideal body weight. We've actually both increased ours now because we've had more experience with people over the years. Now, his recommendation is 2 to 2.5 grams. Mine's 2.2, 2.5 grams. But the caveat of that is the people I work with are on, specifically for the most part, body recomposition journeys. So I'm going to want to push protein more to try and get more muscle in their body. It's a bit more deliberate. It does take a bit of fine tuning, like I said, but some people, they might find they get digestive distress from too much protein. So 2 might be too much. So you lower it a bit, maybe 1.8 grams per kilo, something like that. But I believe a protein-centric diet should be the most important thing. Personally, something like, again, if we're looking at calories, if you're doing 40% of your calories roughly from protein, you're probably going to get a bit better long-term outcome. Y peptide hormone will increase, leptin will increase, ghrelin will reduce, and that's because you're taking in what your body needs. That's through vitamins, minerals, amino acids. You're putting the resources on board onto your body so it can deal with the stress of life, recover properly, and stuff like that. And I see a lot of people in the carnivore space online that do a high-fat, low-protein diet, and they're like, oh, look at me, I'm losing weight fast. They're probably, initially, probably not, but they will probably over time reduce their total muscle mass, just because they didn't have enough to sustain the muscle that they're taking in through protein. They'll find that they're taking in less vitamins and minerals, so they're less active. So again, less able to form activity and exercise. Then what actually happens is the gluconeogenesis will actually reduce. So the creation of muscular glycogen from glucose from protein through gluconeogenesis will be less. So their effective glycogen levels will be less. They'll look at the scale weight and insist that they're losing body fat. They're just becoming a smaller human overall. It can lead to sarcopenia. Again, these things are useful as like a reset, maybe like a detox, things like that if your digestion's sluggish. But as a long-term thing, no. That's not what I'm an advocate for. So when I set a plan for someone, I have to make sure it's achievable, make sure they can actually adhere to it. And I find that for the most part, my clients don't really fall off their plan. They really don't. And a lot of my guys now have been long-term carnivores because of it, because I've directed them away from the challenges, the sardine fasts, the fat fasting, the, all this extra stuff, because they're not sustainable. And they're designed by people that sell programs to keep you locked in to the loop. That's why you'll find a lot of people, I won't say who, but there's a certain gang online on YouTube, carnivore gang, and they don't produce long-term sustainable outcomes. They just don't. And the reason why I say that is because they're making $200,000 plus per month from their group coaching calls and not having people fall off or leave the plan because they don't give them long-term tools to sustain a diet which they can maintain. So they'll get the weight loss. Oh, I'm not getting it anymore. Fall off the wagon. Addictive behaviors, binge eat, weight's gone back up, and they'll just go through this continuously. So when I work with people, I try to get them to a point where they can leave the nest effectively and do their own thing. So I teach them usable, repeatable skills.
Great. Well, that takes me very nicely onto Raquel's question. Raquel at 648. She asks, being perimenopausal, I find this period in a woman's life very hard due to the muscle loss, and even harder now to lose weight? Apart from taking supplements, any tips you give to help on your to help women on your consultations?
Yeah, so obviously it depends what someone's dealing with, but the supplement side of things is a very small part of the equation. They're not necessary. They're not. They don't have to be part of what you're trying to do, but they certainly can help. So I'll be ignorant to say that supplements don't help, because they do. My sort of target, really, if most people, is to follow a diet based on what I see anecdotally. It doesn't mean that everyone goes to that direction, but for the vast majority of people, they do. And that's usually 2 to 3 meals per day, with something like, depending on your body weight, maybe 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal. I don't think I've ever worked with anyone on less than 150 grams of protein per day. That's what's going to sustain your muscle mass. There's some recipes you can try out. So you can try out maybe a carnivore diet with a carnivore jelly, a carnivore ice cream, a carnivore protein butter bite. And that's going to give you high yield of energy, high yield of protein in a very small space. So if your appetite is low, you can eat something which is hyper palatable. That's going to be quite helpful. These things can be useful tools. For me, they're very useful because they allow me to sustain more muscle mass than what I would do otherwise. Evidence to support that claim comes from the fact that when I went to Lanzarote for 2 weeks, I lost nearly 4 kilos, and I was eating the same amount of meals per day, the same amount of meat, but for whatever reason, even though I was eyeballing the weights of foods I was taking, I still lost a lot of weight. So for me, supplements are very useful because they add to my diet. Now, if you're using them to replace parts of your diet, not a good idea. But something like a protein shake, if you can tolerate it, a beef protein shake, brilliant. You can't really go too wrong with that. And they'll have other supportive effects. The carnivore jelly is a particularly good one because if you like sugar-free squash, you can mix gelatin powder with sugar-free squash and make a jelly out of that. And gelatin is very supportive towards joint health. It can help reduce symptoms of ADHD, autism, because of the glycine, which has an NMDA inhibition effect, which means your pain levels will be less, your sensory overload will be less. It's got something called glycine in it, in these collagen and gelatin type products. And that help your sleep as well, so calm your nerves. So if you're dealing with any sort of perimenopausal symptoms, so low mood, that'd be quite a helpful addition. So that'd be what I'd suggest, at least in the interim, before you sort of get your diet nailed down. But that's usually my sort of port of call tips as a general rule of thumb.
Can I go on to ask another question about that? For many of us women that are suffering from that state, but also for some men who are going through the androgen menopause? I don't know, you know what I'm like. But the point is that a lot of the times it's due to the hormone imbalance. So what sort of things can we eat that will help us to better balance our hormones?
For women in particular, they do have a lower tolerance to carbohydrates. I'd be more keen on lowering them more. You'd have to make sure you have enough fat in your body. Fat's going to, from animal sources at least, going to provide you with cholesterol, which is a building block of hormones. So if you cover the resource side of it, you're already half the way there. The other part of it is maximizing your things like your daily habits, so your sleep routine, sleep hygiene. Your blue light exposure will impact the amount of omega-3 that you need for your diet each day. So having oily fish or a good quality fish oil supplement will help. So more omega-3. They'll help your cells communicate effectively. I could really go to the weeds in this one. I don't know. What would you like to know most about?
How about fellas with the low libido, for example?
Oh, just find a fit bird and give her one. That does a job.
Jonathan, come on, seriously.
No, so for men, I guess, I think that a lot of testosterone markers can be a bit misleading sometimes. So you might have someone with a high testosterone level on the charts in a blood test, but they'll feel dreadful. Well, if their E2 level is out of bounds, so it might be, for example, they might have a testosterone level of 1,000, an estrogen level of 80. that's quite a high conversion rate from testosterone into estrogen. So they might suffer the same symptoms as someone with low estrogen levels, which are low mood, low libido, dry skin, poor cognition, poor memory, things like that. In that case, you'd be looking at reducing your body fat levels if they're elevated. People that use performance-enhancing drugs, if they're using high levels of testosterone and they're over fat, they'll typically get more side effects. And that's because there's too much fat on their body, so that their conversion rate into estrogen will be too high. So they might, on paper, have good numbers, but the estrogen number might be too high. Outside of that, you're looking at sufficient selenium levels, tyrosine levels, you're looking at iodine, minerals, omega-3. But basically all the vitamins, minerals in your body, you need to make sure that you've got enough protein in your diet, which is where all the bioavailable vitamins and minerals will come from. So if you've got those things nailed down, you've still got issues, I would personally book in for a consultation and provide some blood work, because there'll be something on there which is indicating that there's a problem somewhere. But yeah, I mean, looking at from broad spectrum, animal proteins, sufficient animal fats, suitable body fat levels, not too high, not too low. And you're probably going to need a bit more testing as well, just to be sure, because you don't want to be pulling all these levers, they're not knowing what's working. So once you get to a point where you're biohacking your whole life, but really you just need to do one little thing, like take iron for a transient time where you've got gut distress, you're not absorbing as much iron, something like that. So it's quite a big topic again, but that's what I'll be looking at.
Just for clarification, when we're talking about animal fats, are we talking about things like a real butter, or like having the fat that's rendered on a piece of steak or a piece of bacon or something like that, and things like double cream? Is that the kind of animal fats that you're talking about?
Animal fats, yeah. So that's where I primarily get most fats from, ideally from actual animals. So you're looking at, best case scenario, guys, you're looking at lamb, salmon, beef, mackerel, eggs as well. Butter's also quite good, cream's also good. The only thing about those is they are technically a processed food in some kind of state, so you're not going to get the full spectrum of what you might need, but they certainly do add to your diet more than avocado, for example.
Okay, so an egg a day, an extra egg a day.
I'd be on 3 or 4 eggs if you're worried.
Good shout. Okay, I want to get on to Johnny's question, but before I do, because it ties in with what Raquel asked, could we go and check out my bone mass?
Yeah. We're gonna have to finish this soon. So bone mass can be bone mass is something which is impacted gradually over a long period of time. It's not something you're going to suddenly take calcium, vitamin D and vitamin K2 then think, oh, I've gone up by 2%. That's not going to happen. The actual skeletal weight that you might have depends who you are, how tall you are, big you are genetically, about 10 pounds per man maybe. So Joe, you're obviously female, so yours is going to be 3.3 kilos. It's something like 7 pounds. That matches what I'd think would be about right. There are obviously scales to these things, but it's not a number which you're going to be too concerned about, unless it's very high or very low. The issue that people have,
osteoporosis for especially women perimenopausal.
Yeah. All right. So what's going to impact things like that is vitamin D is going to affect the calcium, which is what's going to add to your bones. You need enough calcium and enough protein to create bones. So protein is actually probably more important for creating bones. If you get enough protein in, you're probably getting enough calcium in. So that's why I'd look first for most people. The vitamin D will help absorb the calcium into your body, so you don't actually end up needing loads of it. So you become more efficient, basically. But these are what I'd consider pretty good numbers.
Wonderful. Now, I'm not sure if we've got time for the blood oxygen and energy. I'm going to leave that to you because I understand that you'll be in pain for sitting quite so long. I want to say hello to Kimberly. Kimberly is, am I right, she's 11 weeks away from competition. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Kimberly? She's one of your clients.
Yeah, so Kimberly started working with trying to think, maybe 6 to 9 months ago. I might be a bit wrong. She did her own weight loss journey on her own off her own back. She applied all the right things, so she started a carnivore diet. She's got there probably more efficiently than pretty much anyone out there I've really known, the most part. So she started off very, what you consider, over fat. Now she's a slim, trim, athletically built female. Her current goal is to compete in 11 weeks in a transformation challenge. So it's a bit different to bodybuilding. Yes, you are judged by your physique, but it's more about the journey itself. So the measurement is, where do you start and where do you get to? And the stuff in between is all the fun stuff. And currently working with her, sort of creating training plans, diet plans, tweaking things, just so she gets the most out of what she's doing in the gym. And she actually lives with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and some similar symptoms to what I have, actually. So we have a very similar sort of training style, which I've kind of implemented to her program. And what's actually interesting is she has better technique than nearly everyone I know. And she's not someone that was watching my stuff beforehand, so she already sussed this out for herself for the most part. All I really did was sort of put the chair on top and, find little tweaks here and there to sort of balance out the physique a bit. But she's working at the moment to sort of streamline her waist, create more of an hourglass figure, a balanced female but strong body. And that's what I encourage everyone to do, really. So yeah, that's my story of Kimberly. And we're currently checking in every 2 to 3 weeks at this point. And it's just about subtle changes that she can sustainably, reliably, and repeatedly do each day, and get to the end point, which is a fit, strong, muscular, tight-looking body. I believe she's got like a bikini, like an outfit sorted. So she'll win the competition coming up, and it'll be a very nice achievement for her. I'm sure she'll do very well.
Kim looks fantastic. So very well done to you, Kim, for doing it naturally, and for the transformation. I really, really wish you all the best in that competition. Okay, so Jonathan, I'm going to get us back up to Johnny's question. It's 701. And then I think that would take us on to the last thing I want to talk about. So Johnny asked, I'm 6'2". I'm 76.2 kilos and I train 3 to 4 times a week. He takes 12 to 15,000 steps a day and he's trying to lose 5 kg of fat because he's getting ready for a modeling shoot. I'm strict carnivore. Okay. Any tips in doing so? How to structure diet, etc.?
I've already covered this twice now. It's the same advice as before. So regarding the protein intake, I'll be looking at 2.2 to 2.5 kilos. As he's doing a high level of output, personally, Johnny, your main lever is not going to be doing more stuff in the gym. 3 to 4 times a week is brilliant. I don't think you could do better than that. Obviously, what you do in the gym is the most important thing. I know lots of people go to the gym every day, but they don't do anything. So try and fit a sustainable program that sort of makes sense for you. I'll be looking at my stuff. So I've got a playlist on YouTube called Exercise Playlist. That gives you an idea of like form, technique, training volume. That is quite subjective, but at least to give you a better idea of how I might train in your situation. In terms of structuring diet, I'll be looking at the higher end of the protein intake for you, just because your output is so high. So 2.5 grams of protein per kilo. So you're looking at 35, 38 plus 150, 200, something like 180 to 210 grams of protein per day. And I'd keep that diet the same for 1 week. And the fat intake, you might even, looking at your goals, I can't remember his time frame. Do you remember his time frame at all?
He said he's getting ready for a modelling shoot, but doesn't say the time frame. I'm thinking that his 5 kilos of weight is similar to the weight loss that you're looking for ready for your competition.
Yes, pretty similar. Yeah, so in this instance, it depends how many levers he's pulled already. If he's already eating very low fat, very low carb, he's got high output already, he's just going to have to run that through. He will probably struggle if he's got a long time to diet and he's already pulled all the levers. In this case, I mean, I'd do probably 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of fat to start. Do that for a week, take some photos, take your waist measurement, take a weight to measurement as well, track your strength in the gym. Ideally, you want to retain as much strength as possible whilst losing body fat at the same time. That means you're maintaining the muscle mass that you've put on. I really couldn't say, Joe, without a time frame.
Well, I think the answer on this one is booking for a consultation.
Yeah, I really can't, Johnny. Sorry, I can't really do much more. Because, I mean, if I said to him, do 50 grams of fat a day because it's in 3 weeks, yeah, that would do the job. That will get him lean out. That will probably give him the 5 kilo drop that he's after. If I said do 50 grams of fat per day and do that for 12 weeks, he'd be emaciated, he'd hate me, and he'd probably give me lots of nasty 4-letter words on the internet. So I couldn't really say. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Do you want to finish then telling us a little bit more about your competition? You're going in for a bodybuilding competition early June.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your prep for your competition in 5 weeks' time?
It's in 7 weeks.
7 weeks, not bad.
7 weeks, yeah. So, what do you want to know?
No, just tell us a little bit more, because as you say, we know that you suffer with chronic pain, but you actually are competitive bodybuilder.
Okay, yeah. I really don't know, Joe. Can you ask me a more specific question? Because I don't know where to start.
I just want to say that, as you say, you're a bona fide nutrition coach, but you also are a competitive bodybuilder. You're doing the you're getting the results. Carnivore works for you, but also, as you say, you are not doing anything gimmicky. What you do is based on the science and the macros that work for you. And when you work with people like Kim and other people that you work with, you work on personalization things for them that is sustainable. So I think that was really what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
We've got Ivy's just joined us, so hi Ivy. Jonathan, how much longer have you got before you want to finish?
About 5 minutes max.
Do you want to go cover my blood oxygen energies before you go?
Yeah, we'll do that. So these just to reiterate, anyone just joined the chat, this is Joe's recent blood markers which relate to blood oxygen and energy levels. Some of this is immune related as well. The B12 here, that's a level of 10,020. That's high, but it just means that she's probably going to be, how to put it, means she may have more requirements of things like B3, and her methylation rate might be slightly impaired over time. That's not necessarily will happen. It's just to be mindful of not, for example, having a can of Red Bull with lots of B12 in it, or taking B12 supplements. If she's taking supplements, that's something we wouldn't have to worry about. The other thing, the plasma failure level, that's bang in the middle of in range. And other things as well. I mean, everything here is pretty much what I'd hope it to be. And
I'm very happy about
it. This is,
for example, my hematocrit level was always so low. I always had really low hematocrit. I can't say it properly.
Yeah.
But that seems to be increasing.
Yeah, your body is less wasteful when you're in a state when you're got lower body fat levels. Everything's going to be more in range, and I'd say, given your health journey, I mean, what you've achieved over a year is pretty bananas. Because I'd expect a lot of these things still to be a bit iffy. Red blood cell count I'd expect to be probably too low. I'd expect the folate level to be a bit lower. B12 I'd expect to be lower. The immune markers are all pretty much within range. For most people, they are for the large majority of the time anyway. So I don't really see a problem with it. I mean, I'll be quite glad if I had that blood test drawn. So, but yeah, I'd carry on as you are. I wouldn't see a need to change your diet or anything. I'd just be mindful of not taking B12 supplements. That'd be the only thing.
No, so I'm not taking any B12 supplements, although it may be in a multivitamin that I'm on. Very, very last question for you then, Jonathan. Very, very last question. Why is strength training more important than cardio for people who have a lot of weight to lose? and I've taken a GLP-1.
Which question is that? Is that one you've written down?
Yes, just come in at 7:20.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got someone spamming the chat. It's a bit irritating. Yeah. Goodbye. All right.
Get rid of them. Thank you.
I can't see the screen. I'm getting blurry eyes, Joe. I can't read it. Can't see it.
Now, the question is, why is strength training more important than cardio? And that's the last question for today.
Yeah. So strength training maintains the muscle mass that you've got on your body. If you've got less muscle mass, you're less metabolically active, which means you'll be less able to do stuff. So you'll be less able to enjoy life. Now people always make this mistake online, and this is even when I correct them on it. I correct them just because it's important to be factual. If there's something wrong, you should say something's wrong. So the best indicator we have on health, oddly enough, is not what anyone thinks. It's actually walking pace. Your speed of walking is the best indicator of long-term health. The next one is strength. You measure that through things like your grip strength. The next one after that is going to be muscle mass. By default of having a high level of muscle mass, you'll always be stronger as well. But it's a strength that gives you the benefit, because you can still do stuff. You still get up out of your chair. You can still, reach for things in a cupboard. But I know people that are very muscular like myself, but relatively speaking, in certain situations, I'm not that strong. So for me, my grip strength is a good marker of my longevity potential. But walking pace for me specifically is even more important, because if I'm in less pain, I can walk faster. And if I can walk faster, I can do stuff better. And I mean, in our day-to-day lives, there's more instances just day-to-day where we're going to need to be able to walk a distance that are going to be important and vital to us versus being strong. For example, I walked to the gym from the car park. I went upstairs, walked up the steps, walked around the gym, did a little warm up on the treadmill. That's what I need to do. But my day-to-day life, or an average person's day-to-day life, is not to bench press 200 kilograms. There's no requirement to do that in human life, but there is a requirement if you're fit and healthy and mobile to be able to walk somewhere. So that's what my sort of key indicator would be. But yeah, I mean, like I said, having muscle, being strong is going to give you more metabolic adaptability. Adaptability, is that word? So basically, if you take in any discretions for your diet, if you have a Snickers bar, you're going to be better able to tolerate the miscongruencies of eating a bad or junk food versus if you've not got the muscle mass in your body. So that's why it's more important to be honest, really.
Wonderful. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you are suffering right now, so we're going to draw it to a close, but I think we've got plenty of questions for another live that we'll do again soon. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining, guys. And Joe and I will probably do another live very soon, in the very near future. But yeah, if you're not subscribed to Joe, please do. And also, after the stream, if you comment #cat on both my channel and Joe's channel, Miss Mary there on the screen will also have a lovely treat to have. And she's a bit shy now, but definitely do that, and it'll help us out a lot with the algorithm and sharing out our content. So hopefully this has been useful to you guys, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.
Build muscle and lose fat on the carnivore diet.